The rain in Hong Kong didn't fall. It felt like it was orchestrated. It hammered against the reinforced blast shields of the Hong Kong Shatterdome, a relentless, rhythmic drumming that had become the background noise of the apocalypse. Inside the LOCCENT, local command center, the air was recycled, smelling of ozone, stale coffee, and the distinct copper tang of high-voltage anxiety. Tendo Choi adjusted his glasses, the reflection of the holographic sensor array dancing across the lenses. The Kaiju war had a rhythm to it. The silence, the seismic shift, the breach opening, the drop, the fight. It was a cycle of trauma that humanity had learned to endure, if not master. But today, the rhythm broke. "Marshal," Tendo said, his voice tight. He didn't shout. In Lockett, shouting meant you were already dead. "I'm picking up a displacement signature, Sector 7, near the Marianas, but not at the breach." Marshal Stacker Pentecost stood at the edge of the command platform, his posture rigid, a monolith of black wool and iron will. He stared at the main screen, where the map of the Pacific Rim glowed in ominous reds and blues. "Is the throat opening?" "Negative, sir. The breach is stable. Closed." Tendo's fingers flew across the haptic interface, rewriting code on the fly to filter out the background noise of the ocean's thermal vents. "This isn't a Kaiju signature. It's not blue. It's atmospheric, gravitational." "A storm? Sir, it looks like a hole in the sky." On the main screen, the telemetry went wild. The graph didn't show the rhythmic, birthing pulse of a Kaiju emerging from the antiverse. It showed a violent, tearing spike, a rupture. It was a massive discharge of energy that looked less like biology and more like quantum mechanics gone wrong. "Displacement imminent," Tendo yelled, the monitors flashing a warning red that had nothing to do with the category scale. "Something is coming through. Mass estimate is..." "God, that can't be right." Pentecost turned, his eyes narrowing. "Give me the mass." "Sir, reading 50,000 tons, give or take." The Lockett went silent. 50,000 tons. Slattern, the only Category 5 ever recorded, was estimated to be massive. But even the heaviest Kaiju had a certain buoyancy to them. Silicon-based, porous bones to allow for size. 50,000 tons compressed into a single entity was dense. Impossibly dense. "Is it a Category 6? Someone whispered from the back banks. "Prepare the launch bay," Pentecost ordered, his voice cutting through the speculation. "Get Raleigh and Mako to Gypsy. Put the Hansons on standby and Striker. I want Crimson Typhoon monitoring the harbor." "Sir," Tendo interrupted, "the object has impacted the water. The displacement wave just capsized a destroyer group 3 miles out. It's moving." "Is it heading for the city?" Tendo hesitated. He maximized the sonar rendering. The shape forming on the screen wasn't the elongated reptilian nightmare of a Kaiju. It was upright, broad-shouldered, bipedal. "No, sir," Tendo said, breathless. "It's confused. It's thrashing. It's drowning." Kong did not understand the cold. His last memory was the humidity of the hollow earth, the smell of ancient pollen, and the roar of a challenge from a titan he was about to subjugate. Then the light had twisted. The gravity, which usually pulled him toward the center of the world, had inverted, grabbing him by the stomach and flinging him through a kaleidoscope of violent violet light. He hit the water with the force of a falling moon. The impact should have shattered his bones, but Kong was built of denser stuff than the creatures of this world. He was an alpha titan, a survivor of an ecosystem where gravity played favorites. He plunged deep, the darkness of the ocean swallowing him. It was freezing. The water here tasted different, sharper, poisoned with oil and rust, lacking the rich, mineral taste of his home. Pressure crushed against his eardrums, but he roared, forcing the water out of his lungs, his massive heart pumping like a subterranean engine. He kicked. The movement created a cavitation bubble that collapsed with the sound of a depth charge. He clawed his way toward the surface, his fur matted and heavy, his muscles burning for oxygen. Breach. Kong broke the surface, gasping, water cascading off his shoulders like waterfalls. He coughed, spitting out the brine. His eyes, ancient and amber, scanned the horizon. Where was the ceiling? In the hollow earth, the sky was a rocky firmament lit by crystals. Here the sky was a terrifying, endless void of gray clouds and rain. The storm lashed at his face. He hated the rain. He hated the water. He wanted solid ground. He spun in the water, treading with massive, agitated strokes. To his left, he saw lights, not the bioluminescence of the warbats or the soft glow of the HEAVS. These were harsh, artificial lights. A city, a massive hive of stone and steel rising from the water's edge. And standing between him and the land were the giants. He squinted through the gale. 2 of them. They stood waist-deep in the churning ocean, blocking his path to the warmth of the city. They looked like titans, but they smelled wrong. They didn't smell like meat or blood or fear. They smelled like the little ones, the humans, but magnified 1,000 times. They smelled of ozone and hot metal. One was sleek and gray, with a chest that glowed like a trapped star. The other was broader, darker, with 3 arms. Kong snarled, a low rumble that vibrated the water around him. He didn't want to fight, he just wanted land. He slapped the water with an open palm, a warning splash that sent a tsunami rolling toward the metal giants. "Move," the gesture said, "or I move you." Inside the con pod of Gypsy Danger, the rain was just a static hiss against the hull, but the tension was internal. Raleigh Beckett took a breath, letting the neural interface gel settle around his spine. He felt the familiar, invasive click of the suit connecting to his nervous system. Beside him, Mako Mori was already calibrating her hemisphere. Neural handshake initiating in 5, 4. The AI voice, LOCCENT, intoned. Raleigh closed his eyes. The drift. It was the ghost in the machine. To pilot a Jaeger, you had to share your brain. You had to open the door to every memory, every trauma, every fear, and let another person walk around inside. He felt Mako. He felt her discipline, sharp and cold like a blade. He felt her sorrow, a deep well she kept capped. And then, the alignment. The 2 minds snapped together, overlapping until I became we. Right hemisphere, calibrated, Mako said, her voice echoing in Raleigh's head as much as his ears. Left hemisphere, ready, Raleigh responded. They moved their arms in unison, and 260 feet above them, Gypsy Danger raised its titanic fists, servo motors whining with the power of a nuclear vortex turbine. Gypsy Danger, you are clear for engagement, Pentecost's voice crackled over the comms. Target is designated Titanus unidentified. Sensors are erratic. It is not responding to the Kaiju blue spectrum. Treat it as hostile, but do not, repeat, do not, engage with nuclear payload unless authorized. We want a sample, not a crater. Copy that, Marshal, Raleigh said. He looked out the viewport. The creature was unbelievable. Raleigh had fought Knifehead. He had seen the footage of Trespasser. He had studied the biology of every kaiju that had come out of the breach. They were reptilian, insectoid, alien. They were monsters designed by a committee of nightmares. This thing was distinct. It looked like a primate, but the proportions were mythical. It sat low in the water, its shoulders hunched, massive arms keeping it buoyant. The lightning flashed, illuminating a face that wasn't blank with instinct, but contorted with an emotion Raleigh recognized instantly. Annoyance. It's looking at us, Mako said, her thoughts bleeding into Raleigh's. Fear/respect/calculation. It's analyzing our stance. It's just an animal, Raleigh said, trying to steady the drift. Big monkey, probably territorial. Raleigh, Mako warned, look at the water displacement. It's heavy, heavier than anything we fought. Crimson Typhoon is flanking, Tendo reported. Stryker is holding position at the Miracle Mile. The creature, Kong, roared. It wasn't the shriek of a kaiju. It was a bellow, a physical wall of sound that rattled the con pod's suspension. Kong bared his teeth, massive canines the size of sedans, and pounded his chest. The sound was like thunder cracking inside a canyon. Thoom! Thoom! He's challenging us, Raleigh said. He triggered the plasma cannon charging sequence. Let's back him down. Wait, Mako shouted. No plasma! He hasn't attacked! But the reflex was ingrained. A kaiju roars. You charge weapons. The right arm of Gypsy Danger shifted, the plates realigning as the I-19 plasma caster hummed to life, glowing a brilliant, sun-hot amber. Kong saw the glow. He saw the weapon charging. In the MonsterVerse, a glowing chest or a glowing mouth meant a breath attack. It meant Godzilla. It meant death. Kong didn't wait. The speed of the creature defied physics. A standard kaiju telegraphed its moves. They wound up. They screeched. They were biological siege engines, powerful but ponderous. Kong moved like a welterweight boxer. Before Raleigh could fully lock the targeting array, Kong launched himself out of the water. 50,000 tons of muscle and bone exploded forward. "Brace!" Raleigh screamed. Kong didn't punch. He tackled. He slammed into Gypsy Danger with the force of a tectonic shift. Inside the con pod, the world turned sideways. Sparks showered from the overhead consoles. The inertial dampeners, designed to handle the impact of a kaiju claw, screamed as they tried to compensate for the sheer density of the Titan. "Structural integrity dropping," the AI warned. Gypsy Danger, all 1,980 tons of it, was lifted clear off the seabed. Kong's momentum carried them both backward, crashing into the deeper shelf waters. The Jaeger hit the water back first, sending a plume of spray a mile high. Water rushed over the viewport. Raleigh and Mako scrambled to sync their movements, struggling to stand the Jaeger up in the shifting silt. "Get up! Move with me!" Mako yelled. Gypsy rolled, servos straining, and managed to get to one knee. Kong was already there. He stood over them, chest heaving. He reached down, his hand gripping the Jaeger's head. To Kong, the Jaeger felt light, flimsy, like a hollow shell. He expected meat and bone under the plating, but his fingers met cold steel. He tugged. CRRRRAAAACK. "Left con link unstable," Mako cried out as the metal groaned above them. "He's crushing the helmet." Raleigh reacted on instinct. He deployed the chainsword. The blade extended from Gypsy's left wrist, glowing with thermal energy. He swung upward in a desperate arc. Kong saw the flash. He pulled his head back, a hair's breadth reaction, time saving his eye. But the blade seared across his chest, singing the thick fur and scorching the skin beneath. Kong roared in pain, releasing the Jaeger and stumbling back. He looked at the burn mark. The smell of singed hair filled his nose. Now he was mad. "Striker! Crimson! Engage!" Pentecost's voice was losing its composure. "Gypsy is compromised. Get that thing off them." Crimson Typhoon, the three-armed Jaeger piloted by the Weitang triplets, surged forward. Its thundercloud formation was legendary, a spinning vortex of blades and saws designed to slice through kaiju flesh like paper. They activated the buzzsaws on their three hands, the blades spinning up with a high-pitched whine. Crimson lunged, aiming to flank Kong and bleed him out with 1,000 cuts. Kong turned. He saw the spinning blades. He didn't cringe. He looked around. His eyes locked onto a massive jagged rock formation jutting out of the shallow water. A remnant of a previous kaiju battle, perhaps, or just geology. Kong lunged for the rock. His fingers dug into the stone. With a grunt of exertion that rippled the water for miles, he ripped the entire formation, the size of an office building, out of the seabed. As Crimson Typhoon came in for the slice, Kong swung. It wasn't a sophisticated move. It was the first move ever invented. The club. The rock smashed into Crimson Typhoon mid-spin. The impact was catastrophic. The Jaeger was built for speed and agility, heavily armored on the front but reliant on not getting hit. The rock disintegrated on impact, but the kinetic energy transferred perfectly. Crimson Typhoon was batted out of the air like a baseball. It flew 300 yards, skipping across the water surface before cartwheeling into a tangled heap of limbs. "Crimson is down! Pilots are unconscious!" Tendo screamed. Kong stood panting, holding the shattered remains of the rock in one hand. He glared at Gypsy Danger, which was now back on its feet, and Striker Eureka, which was charging its chest missiles. Kong beat his chest again. "Come on!" Dr. Newton Geisler ran down the hallway of the Shatterdome, clutching a tablet so hard the screen was beginning to warp. Herman, look at the readings." Dr. Herman Gottlieb was frantically typing at his console, trying to triangulate the energy signature of the warp. "I am busy, Newton." We are attempting to categorize a dimensional anomaly while a giant ape dismantles our fleet. Forget the anomaly. Newt slammed the tablet down on Herman's console. Look at the thermal output. Look at the heart rate. Herman adjusted his glasses, squinting at the data. High metabolic rate, endothermic, mammalian structure. Yes, it is a giant ape. We have established this. No, you don't get it, Newt said, his eyes manic. The kaiju, they're clones. They have no individual genetic drift. They're weapons made in a factory. This thing? This Kong? Newt swiped the screen to show a DNA sequencing estimation based on the hair Kong had shed in the water. He has scars, Newt whispered. Healed fractures, parasites, viruses. He has an immune system. Herman stopped typing. Meaning? Meaning he grew up, Newt said. He wasn't made. He was born. He evolved. Herman, the Precursors send kaiju to terraform us, right? To kill the vermin, us, so they can move in. Correct. Well, Newt pointed at the screen, where Kong was currently dodging a rocket barrage from Striker Eureka. This isn't vermin. This is a predator. This is Earth's immune system responding. We've been fighting the virus with band-aids. That thing out there? That's the white blood cell. He is currently destroying our band-aids, Newton, Herman pointed out dryly. Because we attacked him first. Newt grabbed his head. We need to stop the fight. If we kill him, we might be killing the only thing that can actually scare the Precursors. Out in the bay, the battle had reached a stalemate. Striker Eureka, the fastest and strongest Jaeger ever built, was keeping Kong at bay, but only just. Chuck and Herc Hansen were fighting for their lives. Every time they landed a punch, it felt like hitting a mountain. He's too dense, Chuck yelled, straining against the harness. Sting blades aren't cutting deep enough. He's got skin like leather armor. Kong was bleeding, though. The missiles had stung him, and Striker's blades had scored cuts across his arms. But he was learning. He realized the missiles came from the chest. Kong fainted. He dipped low into the water, disappearing into the spray. Lost visual, Herc shouted. Sensors, where is he? Underneath you, Tendo's voice screamed over the comms. Kong erupted from the water directly in front of Striker. He didn't strike. He grabbed. His massive hands locked onto Striker's shoulders. The Jaeger's hydraulics whined in protest. Kong roared, his face inches from the con pod. Herc and Chuck saw the intelligence in those eyes. It wasn't the mindless hate of a kaiju. It was judgment. Kong twisted his hips and threw. He used Striker's own weight against it, executing a perfect hip toss. The Jaeger slammed into the water face down. Kong raised both fists, ready to bring them down in a double-axe handle smash that would flatten the con pod and kill the pilots instantly. No! Raleigh shouted over the open channel. Gypsy Danger fired its gravity sling. The beam caught Kong's raised arm, arresting the blow. Kong snarled, turning his head to look at Gypsy. He tugged against the gravity beam, his muscles bulging. He was strong enough to break it, but it paused him. He looked down at the prone Striker Eureka. He could hear the heartbeat of the machine, the reactor humming, but he could also hear something else. The frantic, terrified heartbeats of the two tiny things inside the head. Not Titans. Kong paused. He had killed the skull crawlers because they were empty, hungry things. He killed the warbats because they invaded his home. But these metal shells, they were just suits. Suits worn by the little ones. The little ones who had bowed to him on his island. The little ones who gave him food. Kong lowered his fists. He snorted, a massive spray of mist clearing his nostrils. He released Striker Eureka, letting the Jaeger flounder in the surf. He turned to Gypsy Danger. He stood to his full height, towering over the machine. He didn't roar. He just stared. Done? His posture asked. Raleigh and Mako stood frozen in the drift. He's stopping, Mako whispered. He's sparing them. Marshal, Raleigh said. He's standing down. Do not fire. I repeat, do not fire. Pentecost watched the screen, his hand hovering over the nuclear failsafe. The room held its breath. The Titan was showing mercy. It was unprecedented. And then the alarm screamed. Seismic spike! Tendo yelled, his voice cracking. The breach! It's opening! The water 3 miles behind Kong began to bubble. A sickly, bioluminescent glow irradiated the ocean from beneath. turning the dark storm waves a toxic neon green. Category 4. Tendo read the data. 2 signatures. No, they're moving together. Pack hunters. From the roiling green water, a massive shape emerged. It was sleek, aerodynamic, with a head shaped like a spearhead and massive, wing-like protrusions. Otachi. And right behind it, a brute of a monster, hunched and covered in thick, plating-like armor, with an EMP organ glowing on its back. Leatherback. The PPDC had fought them before in simulations, but never together. Kong spun around. The smell hit him instantly. That was the smell he knew. The smell of the wrongness. The smell of the eternal enemy. The kaiju didn't look at the Jaegers. Their instincts were honed by the Precursors to target the biggest threat to the colonization. The Jaegers were nuisances. Kong was the alpha. Otachi screeched, a sound like tearing metal, and unfurled its wings. Leatherback beat its fists into the water, mimicking a gorilla, mocking the true king. Kong didn't hesitate. He didn't wait for a bell. He turned his back on the Jaegers, dismissing them entirely. He bared his teeth at the new arrivals. He reached down into the water and pulled up a massive chain, part of the harbor's anchor defense system, draping it around his fist like a set of brass knuckles. He roared at the breach, a sound that challenged not just the monsters, but the dimension they came from. Raleigh watched the Titan turn his back on them to face the apocalypse. "Command," Raleigh said, a grim smile hidden inside his helmet. "I think we just got a promotion." "Promotion?" Pentecost asked. "Yeah," Raleigh said, as Kong began to charge toward the 2 kaiju, splashing through the waves like a god of war. "We're not the cavalry anymore. We're the support team." The ocean was no longer water. It was a churning soup of debris, foam, and toxicity. Kong stood waist-deep in the chaos, the massive anchor chain wrapped around his right forearm like a gladiator's cestus. He did not look at the disabled Crimson Typhoon or the struggling striker Eureka. His entire world had narrowed down to the 2 biological nightmares in front of him. He knew their type. In the hollow earth, pack hunters were common. They relied on distraction and flank attacks. One would draw the eye, the other would sever the tendon. Leatherback, the brute, made the first move. The gorilla-like kaiju roared, its electromagnetic organ on its back pulsing with a violent, rhythmic thrum. It charged through the waves, a mountain of leathery muscle and rage. It was clumsy compared to Kong, relying on sheer mass rather than technique. Kong didn't back down. He lowered his center of gravity. As Leatherback lunged for a grapple, Kong stepped inside the guard. It was a move no Jaeger could execute, a fluid, pivoting sidestep that utilized hip rotation rather than hydraulic pistons. Crack. Kong's chain-wrapped fist connected with Leatherback's jaw. The sound was like a thunderclap inside a cathedral. A shockwave of mist erupted from the impact point. Leatherback's head snapped back, a spray of glowing blue blood painting the rain-slicked air. But before Kong could follow up, the sky screamed. Otachi dropped from the clouds. The winged horror didn't land. It strafed. Its tail, a prehensile whip tipped with a triple claw, lashed out. It wrapped around Kong's throat, the momentum dragging the Titan backward. Kong gagged, clawing at the tail. His feet slipped on the continental shelf, churned into mud by the violence. He fell back, splashing into the deeper trench water. "He's overwhelmed!" Mako shouted inside the con pod of Gypsy Danger. 2 Category 4s against a single biological target. "Hold position," Raleigh gritted out. "We can't fire plasma with him in the kill box. We'll hit him." In the water, the brawl was ugly. Leatherback recovered, shaking off the concussion, and leaped onto Kong. The 2 behemoths rolled in the surf. Leatherback bit down on Kong's shoulder, its teeth struggling to pierce the dense, ancient hide of the Titan. Kong roared in pain, not fear. He drove a knee into Leatherback's stomach, doubling the kaiju over, then headbutted it. The impact stunned the kaiju, but Otachi was still there. The flying kaiju landed on Kong's back, digging its talons in, trying to sever the spine. It was a pile-on, a street fight. Kong realized he couldn't out-wrestle 2 of them while submerged. He needed leverage. He needed a weapon. His hand swept the harbor floor. He felt steel, concrete. He grabbed the wreckage of a cargo ship that had been sunk in the initial displacement wave. With a roar that bubbled up through the water, Kong surfaced, ripping Otachi off his back with one hand and slamming the cargo ship into Leatherback's face with the other. The ship crumbled like tin foil, but the jagged metal edges tore into Leatherback's sensory organs. "Prepare to engage," Chuck Hansen yelled from Striker Eureka. "We've got a clear shot at the big one's back. Missiles locked." "Wait," Herc shouted. "Look at Leatherback's dorsal plates." The electromagnetic organ on Leatherback's back flared. It wasn't the rhythmic pulse of before, it was a buildup. The plates opened like a blooming flower of death, crackling with unstable energy. "EMP signature detected," Tendo screamed in the lockant. "All units, shield your systems." It was too late. Leatherback unleashed the pulse. A sphere of distortion rippled outward, passing through the rain, the water, and the machines. Inside Striker Eureka, the world died. The holographic displays winked out. The hum of the nuclear reactor, in Gypsy, or the electrical batteries, in Striker, ceased. The lights died. The HUDs vanished. "Systems failure," Chuck screamed in the darkness. "I can't move. The suit's dead weight." Crimson Typhoon, Striker Eureka, and the entire coastal defense grid of Hong Kong went dark. The Shatterdome lights flickered and died, replaced seconds later by the dim red wash of emergency power. Silence fell over the battlefield, save for the roar of the monsters. Kong paused. He saw the metal men freeze. He saw their eyes, the searchlights, go dark. He didn't understand electricity, but he understood death. He thought they had died. He was alone. Leatherback roared in triumph. The machine threats were neutralized. Now it was just the ape. Otachi landed on a nearby skyscraper, perching like a gargoyle, its throat sac glowing a toxic, burning yellow. Kong stood in the waist-deep water, chest heaving. The rain washed the blue blood of the enemy and his own red blood down his flanks. He looked at the frozen Jaegers, then back at the kaiju. He beat his chest, a slow, rhythmic drumming. "Come down," he signaled to Otachi. "Come down and die." Otachi hissed and spat. A stream of acid, capable of melting Jaeger armor in seconds, arced through the air. Kong's instincts screamed danger. He raised his left arm, the one wrapped in the anchor chain, to block his face. The acid hit. It hissed violently, dissolving the steel chain instantly and searing into Kong's forearm. Kong howled, a sound of agony that made the windows in Hong Kong vibrate. He shook his arm, flinging droplets of acid and molten steel into the water. The pain was blinding. He was hurt, badly. Leatherback charged, sensing weakness. It tackled Kong, driving him back toward the city. Kong's heels dug furrows into the harbor floor, crushing piers and seawalls. He was being pushed back onto land, right where the humans were defenseless. "Reboot! Come on, reboot!" Raleigh smashed his fist against the console in the dark. "It's no good," Mako said, her voice trembling slightly in the drift. "The main relays are fused. The digital interface is gone." "Gypsy is nuclear," Raleigh said, his breath fogging in the cooling air of the con-pod. "The reactor is analog. It doesn't need a computer to burn. We just need to bypass the ignition protocol." "That takes 2 pilots to manually crank the turbine," Mako said, "and without the drift stability." "We hold the drift," Raleigh said, finding her hand in the dark. "We don't need the software. We're compatible. We just need to get the engine turning." Outside, the battle was crashing onto the shoreline. Kong had been knocked onto his back in the shipping yards. Leatherback was on top of him, hammering fists into Kong's face. Otachi was circling, waiting for a clear shot to spit more acid. Kong was fighting dirty now. He bit Leatherback's hand, crushing the fingers. He kicked Leatherback off, scrambling to stand, but his left arm was useless, burned and smoking. He backed up, crashing into a row of warehouses. He grabbed a crane tower, wielding it like a spear, holding the 2 kaiju back. But he was tiring. The toxicity of the blue blood was making him dizzy. The air here was thin compared to the hollow earth. Inside Gypsy danger, the turbine began to whine. It started as a low groan, then a roar. The lights didn't come back on. The digital systems were fried, but the power returned. The hydraulics hissed, repressurizing not with electronic finesse, but with raw mechanical force. "Torque at 100%, Raleigh yelled. "Neural load is heavy." Mako gritted her teeth. Without the software filtering, the raw sensory input of the Jaeger was flooding their brains. They felt the weight of every ton of steel. Gypsy Danger moved. It didn't step with the grace it usually had. It lurched. It was a zombie coming back to life. Leatherback, preparing to deliver a killing blow to a stumbling Kong, heard the horn. BWAAAAAAAAAMP. The war horn of Gypsy Danger cut through the storm. Leatherback turned, confused. The machine should be dead. Raleigh and Mako moved in sync. They didn't have weapons targeting. They didn't have plasma cannons, software locked. They had fists. Gypsy Danger broke into a run. It wasn't fast, but it was heavy. Kong saw the gray giant move. He saw it charging toward him. He braced for a 3-on-1 fight. But Gypsy didn't aim for Kong. Raleigh and Mako steered the Jaeger past Kong, shoulder-checking Leatherback with the force of a freight train. The impact sent the kaiju sprawling into the deeper water. Kong blinked. The machine helped? "Mako, the acid!" Raleigh shouted. Otachi was swooping in, throat glowing. "Deploy coolant!" Mako triggered the manual override for the reactor coolant vent. As Otachi spat the stream of acid, Gypsy Danger vented its entire reserve of cryo-coolant into the air. The super-chilled gas met the boiling acid in midair. Hiss! The thermal shock created a massive cloud of neutralized vapor. The acid turned to a harmless, gritty slush that rained down on the bay. Otachi shrieked, blinded by the sudden cloud. Kong looked at the Jaeger. The gray giant stood beside him, venting steam, its stance wide and defiant. Raleigh looked out the manual viewport, locking eyes with the Titan. He raised Gypsy's metal fist and smashed it into the Jaeger's own palm. "Let's finish this." Kong understood. He snarled, a low, approving rumble. He turned his gaze to the confused kaiju. The king had a night. The dynamic shifted instantly. It was no longer a frantic survival brawl. It was an execution. "I've got the flyer!" Raleigh shouted. "Keep the brute off us!" Kong didn't need telling. He saw Leatherback rising from the water, shaking its head. Kong didn't wait for it to recover. He dropped the crane spear and charged on all threes, favoring his burned arm. Leatherback tried to charge its EMP again, the plates on its back shifting. Kong knew that trick now. He leaped, launching 50,000 tons of primate into the air. He landed feet first on Leatherback's shoulders. The impact drove the kaiju down into the seabed. Kong didn't let up. He grabbed the EMP plates with his good hand and pulled. The sound of tearing organic metal and cartilage was sickening. Kong ripped the EMP organ clean off Leatherback's back, severing the connection. Violet sparks and blue gore erupted like a geyser. Leatherback shrieked, a high, keening wail of agony. Kong silenced it. He grabbed Leatherback by the back of the neck and forced its face into the mud, pummeling the back of its skull with hammer fists until the kaiju stopped moving. Meanwhile, Gypsy Danger was dancing with Otachi. "It's trying to lift off," Mako warned. Otachi flapped its massive wings, generating hurricane-force winds that battered the Jaeger. It grabbed Gypsy's shoulders, trying to lift the Jaeger into the stratosphere for a drop kill. "Sword!" Mako yelled. "Manual deploy!" Raleigh hit the emergency release. The chainsaw didn't whir to life. It clunked out, locking into place. It wasn't hot. The plasma heating was offline. But it was still a 60-foot blade of serrated steel. As Otachi lifted them 50 feet into the air, Mako and Raleigh swung. They didn't aim for the head. They aimed for the lift. The blade sheared through Otachi's right wing membrane. The structural integrity of the wing failed instantly. Otachi and Gypsy plummeted back into the bay. Otachi screeched, thrashing on the surface, one wing uselessly dragging. It tried to crawl toward the city, snapping its jaws. It found its path blocked. Kong stood there. He had finished with Leatherback. He was covered in blue and red blood, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with a cold, predatory light. Otachi hissed, trying to summon one last spit of acid. Kong stepped forward. He didn't punch. He grabbed Otachi's upper and lower jaws. The kaiju struggled, its tail flailing, smashing against Kong's ribs. Kong ignored the blows. He planted his feet. He roared into Otachi's throat, silencing the hiss. Then he pulled. The muscles in Kong's back rippled like shifting tectonic plates. The sound of the jaw hinge snapping was wet and final. Kong ripped the lower jaw clean off, tossing it into the ocean. Otachi slumped, the light in its eyes fading as the blue glow of its throat dimmed to gray. The silence returned to Hong Kong. The rain began to lighten. In the shattered harbor, two giants stood amidst the corpses of the invaders. Gypsy Danger stood knee-deep in the water, steam rising from its joints, the reactor humming a low, steady bass note. Kong stood a few hundred yards away. He was licking the acid burn on his arm, grimacing at the taste. He spat into the water. Is it over? Tendo asked over the static-filled comms. The emergency power in the Shatterdome was stabilizing. Targets neutralized, Raleigh said, his voice exhausted. Both Category 4s are dead. And the Titan? Pentecost asked. Raleigh looked up. Kong was walking toward them. Hold your fire, Raleigh said quickly. Everyone, hold fire. Kong stopped 30 feet from Gypsy Danger. Up close, the size difference was apparent. Kong was taller, broader. He leaned down, his massive face level with the con pod. Raleigh and Mako froze. Through the viewport, they could see the intricate details of his face. The scars, the wrinkles, the intelligence in the amber eyes. This wasn't a monster. It was a person, an old, tired warrior. Kong huffed. He reached out a hand. He's going to attack, Mako whispered, though she didn't make a move to defend. Kong didn't attack. He extended one finger, thick as a tank, and gently tapped the chest plate of Gypsy Danger, right over the nuclear vortex. Thump. Thump. He pointed to the dead kaiju. Then he pointed to Gypsy. Then he pointed to himself. He snorted, turned his back on them, and began to wade toward the shore. Not toward the city, but toward the rocky, uninhabited peaks of the coastline. He's leaving, Raleigh exhaled. He's calling it a draw. No, Mako said, unhooking her helmet. He's telling us we did good. For once. 6 hours later, the Hong Kong Shatterdome. The cleanup was a nightmare, but the mood was electric. For the first time in history, humanity hadn't just survived a double event. They had witnessed a miracle. In the briefing room, the atmosphere was chaotic. He is currently sleeping on Victoria Peak, Tendo reported, pulling up a satellite feed. Thermal signature indicates he is in deep REM sleep. He's snoring, sir. The seismic sensors are picking it up. He's not a kaiju. Newt Geisler was practically vibrating, pacing back and forth in front of Pentecost. I'm telling you, Marshal, I drifted with the brain fragment of Otachi. Just a second, just a flicker before the neural bridge collapsed. And I saw it. Pentecost looked weary. Saw what, Mr. Geisler? Fear, Newt whispered. The Precursors? The Masters on the other side? They aren't looking at us anymore. They're looking at him. Newt pulled up a diagram on the screen. It showed the breach and a silhouette of Kong. They know him, or they know his species. In the drift, they called him the rival. They thought they wiped his kind out eons ago. The fact that he's here, it's terrified them? If they are terrified, Herc Hansen growled, nursing a broken arm from the striker crash, then they're going to hit us harder. They aren't going to send dogs anymore. They're going to send wolf killers. Exactly, Herman Gottlieb interjected. The exponential curve of the kaiju evolution will spike. They will design a creature specifically to counter a mammalian skeletal structure. They will target his biology, poison, parasites, pure brute force. Pentecost looked at the map. Kong was a wild card, an unstoppable force that they couldn't control, only hope to aim. We need to communicate with him, Pentecost said. If he stays, he starves, or he destroys the city looking for food. He eats Meyer squids in his world, Newt said, or giant buffalo. We don't have those, but we have whales, sharks. We can synthesize protein blocks. You want to feed a 50,000-ton gorilla with protein bars? Herc asked incredulously. I want to keep the weapon energized, Pentecost said. Raleigh, Mako, you were the closest to him. You established a rapport. He respects the fight, Raleigh said. He helped us because we helped him. Then we keep helping him, Pentecost decided. We repair the Jaegers. We weaponize the fleet to support him. If the Precursors send a wolf killer, we make sure the king has a pack. 3 days later. Kong sat on the edge of the cliff, looking out over the neon skyline of Hong Kong. It was night. The rain had stopped. He was hungry. His stomach rumbled like a minor earthquake. He picked at the scabs on his arm. The burn was healing. His metabolism was incredibly fast, but it itched. He heard the thrum, thrum, thrum of the metal birds. He looked up. A fleet of heavy-lift helicopters, the kind used to transport Jaegers, was approaching. They carried a massive net slung between them. Inside the net was a dead kaiju, a smaller one, perhaps a carcass recovered from a previous battle or a synthesized mass of organic matter. They dropped it on the plateau, a mile away from him. Kong sniffed. It didn't smell great, but it smelled like protein. He looked at the helicopters. One of them, a smaller, sleek craft, hovered closer. Inside the cockpit, Raleigh Beckett spoke over the PA system, which had been rigged to amplify his voice to decibels Kong could hear. "Eat," Raleigh said. It was a simple command. Kong tilted his head. He recognized the voice. It sounded like the gray giant. Kong grabbed the carcass and tore into it. It was tough, but it filled the void. While he ate, he watched the activity in the harbor below. The humans were busy. They were welding. Sparks flew from the Shatterdome. They were fixing the gray giant. But they were doing something else too. On the tarmac, huge cranes were moving massive slabs of titanium steel. They were shaping something, sharpening it. It looked like the dorsal fin of a Godzilla, but attached to a long, reinforced shaft made from the leg of a destroyed Jaeger. It was an axe. Kong stopped chewing. He narrowed his eyes. He remembered the axe. His ancestors had made them, weapons to fight the breath monsters. The humans were making him a tool. The atmosphere was golden, sickly, and thick with ammonia. The gravity was lighter here. The floating rocks of the antiverse drifted in the void. The Precursors, tall, spindly beings with heads like aquatic crowns, moved in a frenzy. The connection with Otachi and Leatherback had been severed violently, but before the end, they had seen the hatred in the eyes of the primate. The bishops of the Precursors gathered around the cloning vats. The current plan, Project Pitbull, was scrapped. The kaiju they were growing, Scunner and Raiju, were insufficient. They were designed to fight robots. They would be torn apart by the primate. They needed an executioner. One of the Precursors activated a new vat. It was larger than the others, darker. They began to weave the DNA. They took the triple-plated armor of the Category 5s. They added the tail spikes of the Thornback clan. They injected the DNA of the venomous subterranean parasites. But they added something new. They added a secondary brain cluster in the chest and a tertiary one in the tail. They reinforced the skeletal structure with carbon-silicon weaving to withstand crushing force. They were not building a kaiju to destroy a city. They were building a kaiju to break a king. The vat bubbled. A silhouette formed in the murky fluid. It was massive. Larger than Slattern, it had 3 tails. The mega kaiju. But even that wasn't enough. The Precursors looked at the rift. They needed to ensure the primate could not use his greatest advantage, his mind. They began to broadcast a frequency, a low psychic hum directed solely at the neurological signature of the Titan. Kong woke up screaming. It wasn't a vocal scream. It was a physical thrashing that shattered the rock shelf he was sleeping on. He clutched his head. The noise, it was inside him. A buzzing, hateful whisper. It sounded like the alpha call of Ghidorah, but twisted, synthetic. "Diefall, obey!" He roared at the sky, swinging his fists at invisible enemies. In the Shatterdome, the alarms went haywire. He's going berserk, Tendo yelled. Neuroscan shows massive activity in his temporal lobe. He's having a seizure. Is it a biological attack? Pentecost demanded. No. Herman stared at the screen, terrified. It's a transmission. From the breach. They're broadcasting a signal to drive him mad. Outside, Kong stumbled toward the city, his eyes rolling back in his head. He was in pain. He needed to make it stop. He needed to kill the noise. And the noise was coming from the water. Kong crashed through the perimeter fence of the Shatterdome. He wasn't attacking the base. He was trying to get to the ocean. But in his delirium, he swiped a guard tower, crushing it instantly. He's going to level the city, trying to silence the noise, Herc shouted. We have to sedate him, Newt yelled. We have enough atorphine in the stores to drop a kaiju, but we have to get close. Who gets close to a thrashing, 50,000-ton maniac? Chuck asked. Raleigh stood up. We do. Gypsy isn't combat ready, Tendo warned. The right arm actuator is still fused. I don't need to punch him, Raleigh said. I need to hold him down while you inject him. Pentecost looked at his best pilot. Mr. Beckett, if you grapple with him while he is in this state, he will tear the Jaeger apart. If we don't, Mako said, stepping up beside Raleigh, he tears Hong Kong apart, and then he goes into the breach alone and dies. Pentecost nodded slowly. Launch Gypsy Danger. The rain had started again. Kong was knee-deep in the harbor, smashing the water, roaring in agony. The sound in his head was a drill. Submit! No! Kong bellowed, smashing a freighter into scrap. Gypsy Danger walked out into the storm. The Jaeger held a massive syringe, the size of a tanker truck, in its left hand. The needle was a reinforced industrial piledriver tip. Hey! Raleigh's voice boomed over the speakers. Kong, look at me! Kong spun, his eyes wild, red-rimmed. He didn't see a friend. He saw movement. He roared and charged. He's coming in hot, Mako yelled. Brace for impact. Kong collided with Gypsy Danger. It wasn't a tackle. It was a mauling. He grabbed the Jaeger's shoulders and shook it, metal screaming. Structural integrity at 70%. Hold him, Raleigh grunted, wrestling the controls. Gypsy shoved back, using its weight to pin Kong against the seawall. Now, Mako, the neck. Mako triggered the left arm. Gypsy raised the massive syringe. Kong saw the weapon. He bit down on Gypsy's right shoulder, crushing the armor plating, ripping out cabling. Warning! Reactor casing compromised. Do it! Raleigh screamed. Mako drove the piledriver needle into the thick muscle of Kong's neck, right where the carotid artery would be. She triggered the plunger. Thousands of gallons of concentrated sedative, enough to put a blue whale into a coma for a year, flooded Kong's system. Kong roared, a sound of betrayal. He shoved Gypsy away, sending the Jaeger crashing into the bay. He staggered back. He reached for his neck, pulling the shattered remains of the needle out. He took one step toward the city, then another. His eyelids grew heavy. The rage in his muscles turned to lead. The noise in his head became dull, distant. He wobbled. Kong fell. He hit the water with a splash that flooded the lower districts of Kowloon. He didn't rise. His breathing slowed to a deep, rhythmic rumble. Target is sedated, Tendo whispered, heart rate stabilizing. In the battered con pod of Gypsy Danger, Raleigh and Mako slumped in their harnesses. We knocked out the king, Raleigh panted. Now, Pentecost's voice came over the comms, grim and resolved. We have to figure out how to wake him up before the breach opens again. Because the next time it opens, hell is coming with it. Here is part 3 of To a Human, a Coma is Darkness. To a Titan, it is a prison. Kong floated in a void that was not sleep. It was a reconstructed memory, twisted by a signal that felt like needles pushed into his brain. He was back on Skull Island, but the sky was a burning violet, the color of the breach. The trees were not wood, they were bone. The water was acid, and the voice was everywhere. It was a chorus of clicking, wet sounds that translated directly into intent. Obsolete, rival, submit. In the dream, the skull crawlers rose from the earth, but they were wrong. They had blue glowing veins. They had metal plating. They swarmed him, thousands of them. Kong swatted them away, but every time he touched one, a jolt of psychic pain lashed his mind. He roared, but no sound came out. "You are alone." The voice was trying to rewrite his instinct. It was trying to tell him that he was not the alpha, that he was prey. It showed him images of his ancestors, dead and broken at the hands of the Precursors' creations eons ago. It showed him a future where he was a puppet. His body used to crush the little ones, the humans, whom he had sworn to protect. Kong squeezed his eyes shut in the dream. He focused on a different feeling, not the pain, not the rage. He focused on the touch he had felt before the darkness took him, the small metal finger tapping his chest, the heartbeat of the machine. The little ones had not killed him. They had stopped the pain. Not alone. Kong opened his eyes in the dreamscape. He grabbed a cyber skull crawler and crushed it. He didn't roar in anger. He roared in defiance. The violet sky cracked. The Hong Kong Shatterdome. Lab 04. "It's not a biological rejection," Newt Geisler was shouting, his hands covered in conductive gel. "It's a frequency, a carrier wave. Look at the oscilloscope." Herman Gottlieb adjusted the dials, his face pale. "The signal is emanating from the breach, bouncing off the ionosphere and targeting the Titan's distinct bioacoustic signature. It is a targeted harassment campaign." "Harassment? It's torture, Herman. They're flash frying his temporal lobe." Newt pointed to the massive holographic display of Kong's brain. "If we wake him up without blocking that signal, he won't be our ally. He'll be a rabid animal. He'll destroy everything in a 5-mile radius just to make the noise stop." "So we build a Faraday cage," Herman suggested, "around his head. He's 50,000 tons. You can't just put a tinfoil hat on a god." Newt paced the room. "We need active cancellation. We need a white noise generator that matches the precursor frequency, but inverts the phase." "A jammer," Raleigh Beckett said from the doorway. He looked tired. His arm was in a sling, a souvenir from the cockpit thrashing. "Can you build one?" "We can build it," Newt said, eyes widening. "But we can't just broadcast it from a tower. The inverse square law applies. If Kong moves away from the city, the signal drops. The jammer needs to be with him." "We mount it on a Jaeger?" Mako asked, stepping in behind Raleigh. "Too much interference with the drift." Herman shook his head. "The neural load of the jammer, plus the Jaeger systems, would fry the pilot's brains." Newt stopped pacing. He looked at the schematic of the massive collar Kong had worn in the transport simulations. Data pulled from Monarch files in a different timeline. Perhaps, or just logical engineering. "We don't put it on a Jaeger," Newt whispered. "We give him headphones." "Excuse me?" Pentecost walked in, looking like a man who hadn't slept in a week. "Not headphones," Newt corrected himself, manic energy rising. "A conduction loop. We build a receiver unit, shielded, with a localized phase inverter. We weld it to something he carries, or something he wears. As long as it's within 50 feet of his skull, the signal is neutralized." "We can rig a harness," Tendo said over the intercom. "Industrial cargo straps, high tensile steel." "No straps," Raleigh said. "He's a fighter. Straps restrict movement. If we put something on him, it has to be something he wants to keep close." Raleigh looked at the blueprints on the table, the weapon the engineering team was designing. "Put the jammer in the axe," Raleigh said. "If he holds the weapon, his mind is clear. If he drops it, the nightmares come back. It'll teach him to never let go of the weapon." Pentecost nodded. "Pavlovian reinforcement. Cruel but necessary. Dr. Gottlieb, Dr. Geisler, get the frequency inverted. Engineering, integrate the jammer into the hilt of the weapon. We have 12 hours before the sedative wears off." The construction of the axe was a feat of engineering that rivaled the Jaegers themselves. They didn't have the dorsal plate of a Titan, as the legends of the Hollow Earth required, but humanity had something else: the scraps of the enemy and the heart of a star. The handle. The shaft was crafted from the salvaged femur of a fallen Jaeger, Cherno Alpha's reinforced strut, recovered from the deep. It was solid titanium alloy, designed to hold up a nuclear reactor. It was wrapped in friction-grip polymer, the same stuff used on Jaeger souls to prevent slipping. The blade. This was the masterpiece. The PPDC miners had dredged up a massive shard of obsidian glass from a jagged fault line, but glass was too brittle, so they encased the obsidian in a lattice of kaiju skin, the harvested, cured plating of the dead leatherback. It was flexible, shock-absorbent, and nearly indestructible. The edge. To give it a cutting edge, they used the serrated chainsword fragments from Gypsy Danger, welding them along the obsidian core. The power source. This was the kicker. Inside the hilt, right where Kong's hand would grip, they installed a spare I-19 plasma caster capacitor. "How does it work?" Herc Hansen asked, looking at the massive object resting on the transport crawler. "Kinetic charging," Tendo explained. "When Kong hits something, the impact energy is absorbed by the obsidian, piezoelectric effect, and channeled into the capacitor. The next swing releases that energy as a thermal discharge. It's a plasma axe. And the jammer? Embedded in the counterweight at the bottom," Tendo pointed to the pommel. "As long as this thing is in his hand, the precursors can't touch his brain." It was ugly. It was industrial. It was a weapon made of scrap metal, dead monsters, and nuclear physics. It was perfect. The sedative levels were dropping. Kong twitched. The massive chest rose and fell with increasing speed. The water in the overflow containment pool rippled. Raleigh and Mako stood on the observation deck of the repaired Gypsy Danger. The Jaeger had been patched up, new plating on the shoulder, a recycled hydraulic system for the right arm. It looked scarred, painted in primer gray in spots, but it stood tall. Next to them, Striker Eureka stood ready, piloted by Herc Hansen and a new co-pilot. Since Chuck's arm was broken in the crash, Herc had drafted the only other drift-compatible ranger available on short notice, a veteran from the Lima detachment. "He's waking up," Tendo announced. Kong's eyes snapped open. The first thing he expected was the noise, the screaming in his head. He braced himself, snarling, hands clutching at the air. But there was silence. Blessed, golden silence. Kong sat up, water cascading off his fur. He blinked. He felt groggy, his limbs heavy, but his mind was his own. He looked around. He saw the gray giant, Gypsy, standing a few hundred yards away. Kong growled low in his throat. He remembered the needle. He remembered the betrayal. He bared his teeth and started to stand, fists clenching. Gypsy Danger did not raise its fists. Instead, it stepped aside. Behind the Jaeger, resting on a massive steel cradle, was the axe. It was 300 feet long. The blade glowed with a faint, pulsing blue light, the jammer active. The handle was wrapped in leather and steel. Kong froze. He knew what an axe was. It was the symbol of his royal lineage. But this was different. This smelled of ozone and iron. Raleigh spoke through the external speakers. "For you." Kong looked at the Jaeger, then at the weapon. He took a tentative step forward. He reached out. His massive hand closed around the hilt. The moment his skin touched the sensors, the jammer synced perfectly. The last remnants of the Precursor's static vanished from his mind. Clarity washed over him like cool water. Kong lifted the weapon. It was heavy, perfectly balanced. He gave it a test swing. Whoosh! The air displaced by the swing shattered windows in the nearby docks. The plasma edge flared to life, leaving a trail of blue fire in the air. Kong looked at the weapon with something akin to awe. He looked at Gypsy Danger. He nodded, "Truce." He placed the axe on his shoulder. He turned to the ocean, to the deep. He knew where the noise had come from, and now he had the tool to silence it forever. The fleet moved out at dawn. It was the largest armada in human history. Every seaworthy destroyer, every aircraft carrier, every submarine was moving toward the Marianas Trench. But the spearhead consisted of three entities: Striker Eureka, Gypsy Danger, and Kong. Kong swam differently than Godzilla. He didn't glide. He powered through the water using a modified breaststroke, the axe held in one hand or strapped to his back with the magnetic harness the engineers had hurriedly fashioned. "Approaching the drop point," Pentecost said from the command carrier. "The breach is active. Seismic readings are off the charts." We have 3 signatures, Tendo reported. They aren't coming through the breach. They're already here. They're waiting on the abyssal shelf. They set up a defensive line, Raleigh said. They know we're coming, Mako added. The plan was simple. Stryker carried the payload, a thermonuclear device with a yield of 1.2 megatons. They needed to drop it into the breach. Kong was the line breaker. Diving, Raleigh said. The Jaegers engaged their thrusters and descended. Kong took a massive breath, expanding his lungs to their limit, and dived with them. The transition to the deep was jarring. The light faded. The pressure built. For the Jaegers, it was a stress test. For Kong, it was his element. He was a creature of the hollow earth. Deep pressure was home. They hit the shelf 5 miles down. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the floodlights of the Jaegers and the bioluminescent glow of the axe. And there, waiting in the gloom, were the executioners. The Precursors had learned. They hadn't sent brawlers, they sent counters. Target 1, Raijin, a bipedal tank. Its head was encased in a kinetic absorption flower. If you hit it, it stored the energy and hit you back harder. Target 2, Shrikethorn, a ranged specialist. It had biological railguns on its shoulders that fired superheated bone spikes. Target 3, Hakuja, a burrower, a mix of a crocodile and a mole, designed to attack from below. They stood between the fleet and the glowing red tear. In reality, that was the breach. Striker Eureka launched a volley of chest missiles at Shrikethorn. The missiles streaked through the water, leaving bubble trails. Shrikethorn sidestepped with surprising grace and returned fire. Spikes the size of telephone poles slammed into Striker's armor. "Evasion protocols!" Herc shouted. Kong didn't wait. He kicked off the seabed, propelling himself toward the biggest threat. Raijin. Kong wound up for a massive punch. "No, Kong, don't!" Raleigh yelled over the external speakers, though sound traveled poorly here. Kong slammed his fist into Raijin's face. Boom! The impact was absorbed instantly. The flower plates on Raijin's face glowed bright orange. Raijin didn't flinch. It grinned. It unleashed the stored energy in a shockwave punch. Kong was blasted backward. He tumbled through the water, smashing into an underwater ridge. He looked confused. He had hit it with enough force to shatter a mountain, and the thing had just eaten the punch. "He doesn't know the mechanics," Mako said. "Gypsy, we have to take Raijin. Kong needs to take the others." Gypsy Danger ignited its rear thrusters. "Hey, ugly," Raleigh taunted, firing the plasma cannon at Raijin's unprotected stomach. Raijin roared and turned its attention to the Jaeger. Kong shook his head, clearing the cobwebs. He saw Hakuja burrowing into the silt, disappearing. Kong knew that trick. Skullcrawler tactics. He didn't chase. He waited. He floated motionless, gripping the axe. The silt erupted beneath him. Hakuja lunged for Kong's legs, jaws wide. Kong didn't panic. He retracted his legs, letting the kaiju pass beneath him, then brought the axe down. Crunch. The blade didn't sever the kaiju. Water resistance slowed the swing, but the plasma capacitor discharged. A bolt of blue lightning fried Hakuja's sensory nodes. The kaiju spasmed, thrashing in the mud. Kong grabbed Hakuja by the tail and swung it like a flail, smashing it into Shrikethorn, who was peppering Striker with spikes. The battle on the shelf was a chaotic swirl of mud, blood, and steam. Striker Eureka was holding its own against Shrikethorn, using its sting blades to sever the bone guns. Gypsy Danger was dancing with Raijin, waiting for the kinetic shields to close before striking. Kong was brawling with Hakuja, grappling the serpentine beast. "We're running out of time," Pentecost warned. "Oxygen levels for the Titan are dropping. He's been under for 15 minutes. Kong was indeed slowing down. He needed air, but he couldn't leave. Suddenly, the breach pulsed. The 3 kaiju stopped fighting. They didn't retreat. They looked at each other. Raijin grabbed Shrikethorn. Hakuja wrapped around Raijin's legs. "What are they doing?" Herc asked. "Oh no!" Newt's voice came over the comms, terrified. "The Precursors, they aren't just cloners. They're grafters. It's the Rippers. They're fusing." A cloud of nanomites, the black swarm used by the Precursors to stitch tissue, erupted from the breach. It engulfed the 3 kaiju. Flesh melted and reformed. Bones snapped and locked together. From the cloud rose a monstrosity, the Mega Kaiju. It stood 500 feet tall. It had Raigen's kinetic plating, Shrikethorn's spikes, and Hakuja's tails. It had 10 limbs. It was the size of a god. Kong looked up. Even he, the king, looked small next to this abomination. The Mega Kaiju roared. The sound created a shockwave that cracked the viewports of Striker Eureka. "It's guarding the throat," Raleigh said. "We can't get the bomb past that." Kong looked at his axe. The light was dimming. He was out of breath. His lungs burned. He looked at the surface miles above. Then he looked at the Mega Kaiju. He made a choice. He banged his chest once. "Go!" he signaled to the Jaegers. "I clear the path." Kong charged. It was suicide. Kong swam straight at the Mega Kaiju. The beast swatted him aside like a fly. Kong crashed into the seabed, a cloud of blood erupting from his nose. The Mega Kaiju raised a massive, crushing foot. Gypsy Danger intervened. Raleigh and Mako boosted into the path, firing both plasma cannons at the Mega Kaiju's eyes. "Diversion!" Raleigh screamed. "Striker, make the run! Drop the package!" "We can't leave you!" Herc shouted. "Go!" Striker Eureka engaged full thrusters, diving past the fight toward the glowing red abyss of the breach. The Mega Kaiju saw the bomb carrier. It ignored Kong and Gypsy. It turned, its tails lashing out to intercept Striker. One of the tails caught Striker's leg. The Jaeger was whipped around, slamming into the rock wall. "Main drive damage," Herc yelled. "We can't make the drop. The delivery system is fried." The bomb was stuck on the shelf. The Mega Kaiju loomed over Striker, preparing to tear the nuclear core out. Kong saw this. He saw the little ones about to die. He felt the axe in his hand. The jammer was humming. He needed power. The axe was empty. He looked at Gypsy Danger. Kong pointed to the axe. Then he pointed to Gypsy's plasma cannon. Raleigh understood instantly. "He wants a charge. Mako, divert all reactor power to the right arm. It'll stall the engine." "Just do it!" Kong held the axe up, presenting the blade. Gypsy Danger fired. A sustained beam of pure plasma energy slammed into the axe. The obsidian drank the fire. The capacitor whined, the pitch rising higher and higher until the blade was glowing a blinding star white. Kong roared. He kicked off the rock wall, launching himself at the Mega Kaiju. He didn't swing for the head. He swung for the tails holding Striker. Shroom! The supercharged axe sliced through the Mega Kaiju's 3 tails like a laser through butter. The beast shrieked, releasing Striker. Kong landed on the Mega Kaiju's back. He buried the burning axe deep into the creature's spine. He rode it, stabbing and tearing, buying time. "Striker is down," Raleigh yelled. "They can't carry the bomb." "I can," Raleigh said to himself. "Gypsy, what are you doing?" Pentecost demanded. "The bomb is manual now," Raleigh said. "We have to trigger it, but we need to get it into the throat." Kong was being battered. The Mega Kaiju reached back, grabbing Kong and throwing him off. It turned to kill him. Gypsy Danger walked over to the crippled Striker Eureka. "Herc, eject," Raleigh ordered. "Give us the payload." "Raleigh? Eject!" Herc and his co-pilot punched out. Their escape pods shot toward the surface. Gypsy Danger grabbed the nuclear package. "Mako," Raleigh said softly. "Ready?" "For family," Mako whispered. Gypsy Danger ignited its chest turbine. It grabbed the bomb. But the Mega Kaiju was still there. It stood directly over the breach, wounded but furious. It opened its mouth, charging a beam of energy that would vaporize Gypsy. Kong saw it. He was drowning. His vision was fading. But he was the king. Kong didn't swim away. He swam under the Mega Kaiju. He grabbed the beast's ankles. With a final earth-shattering heave, Kong lifted. He didn't lift it up. He tripped it. He pulled the Mega Kaiju's legs out from under it. The massive beast toppled backward, falling into the breach. The Mega Kaiju clawed at the edge, trying to climb back out. Kong grabbed his axe. He leaped onto the Mega Kaiju's chest as it fell into the portal. He looked back at Gypsy Danger. He looked back at the world he was leaving. He fell into the red light, driving the axe into the enemy's heart, dragging the Guardian into hell with him. "Now!" Raleigh screamed. Gypsy Danger leaped. Holding the bomb, the Jaeger dived into the breach, right behind the tangle of fighting monsters. The transition was violent. Gravity twisted. Kong and the Mega Kaiju crashed onto the alien landscape of the Antiverse. The gravity was low here. They bounced, tumbling across rocky floating islands. Kong ripped the axe free. The air here was breathable, thick but breathable. He stood up. He was surrounded. Thousands of precursors watched from the organic citadels. The mega kaiju rose, wounded but enraged. Then Gypsy Danger crashed down beside Kong. The Jaeger stood up. It was leaking oil and coolant. It held the bomb. Self-destruct sequence initiated, the computer voice said. 60 seconds. Raleigh and Mako looked at Kong. Go! Raleigh's voice projected from the Jaeger. Get out! Kong looked at the portal above them, the watery ceiling leading back to Earth. He looked at the mega kaiju charging them. He looked at the bomb. Kong grabbed Gypsy Danger. He didn't attack. He grabbed the Jaeger's escape pods. He ripped them out of the Jaeger's shoulders. Raleigh and Mako screamed as their pods were torn free. Kong held the pods in one hand. He looked at the pilots inside the glass. Live. With a massive swing of his arm, Kong threw the escape pods toward the portal. He threw them with the perfect precision of an outfielder. They soared up, passing through the membrane, back to the ocean. Kong was alone with the empty Jaeger and the bomb. The mega kaiju charged. Kong grabbed the nuclear device from Gypsy's hands. He strapped it to his chest using the harness. He picked up his axe. He turned to the Precursor city, to the factories where they made the monsters. He roared. It was the loudest sound ever heard in that dimension. He charged the city 00:03. Kong leaped into the heart of the alien hive. 00:02. He raised the axe. 00:01. Flash. The ocean surface erupted. A bubble of water a mile wide rose and collapsed. Mist covered the world. The breach was gone. The sensors went flat. On a lifeboat, Raleigh and Mako watched the calm water. Herc Hansen's pod bobbed nearby. They waited. Minutes passed. Did he make it? Mako whispered. The water remained still. No Jaeger surfaced. No Titan. The war was over. The price had been paid. 1 year later, the Pacific was quiet. The Shatterdomes were being converted into museums. Dr. Newt Geisler sat in his lab staring at a monitor. It was a deep space fluctuating signal. Herman, Newt said softly. Come look at this. Herman walked over. Background radiation? No, Newt said. It's a rhythmic pulse. Low frequency. He turned up the audio. Thump, thump. It sounded like a heartbeat. It's coming from the Hollow Earth entry point in Antarctica, Newt said. But the signature, it's slightly radioactive. Impossible, Herman said. The physics, he's an alpha. Newt smiled, tears in his eyes. Gravity bends for him. On the screen, deep in the subterranean tunnels of the world, a shadow moved. It was scarred. It was burned. Its fur was singed gray by nuclear fire, but it was walking, and in its hand, it dragged a massive glowing axe. The king had simply gone home the long way around.